I'm Bob again. It's Friday, September 4th, and I'm here at Exhibit A in downtown Minneapolis, the Federal Courthouse building. Right behind me is a centerpiece of Rockman, a truly fascinating public art installation. It's very thought-provoking. In this chapter and the next chapter, we're going to be looking at the Lakes and Parks Alliance federal lawsuit challenging the current Southwest Light Rail plan and the scoping and routing process. We'll also see how this building itself, the Lakes and Parks Alliance lawsuit's trial setting, and the ectoplasmic cast of Rockman embracing it are a part of our story too. Through these chapters, we'll be looking at some of the Rockman cast members.
I'm Senator Tammy Baldwin from the state of Wisconsin. Just over the past few years, we've gone from literally 0 trains coming through our state carrying volatile Bakken oil to having over 40 per week.
But because rail safety continues to emerge as big news, this chapter's focus is on safety and co-location. That's the plan to have both freight rail and Southwest Light Rail in the Kenilworth corridor. The September 2nd news conference we were just watching was actually interrupted and shut down by a tanker train.
Members of the press, please, last question.
Senator, is this a good example of how close these trains come to these homes and businesses right here in the area?
No. No, it's not a good example.
Does this drive it home to how close and precarious it is?
Absolutely. And obviously, we picked this location because we're right by a school. We're right by this to emphasize first responders and their role they'll play in this, but also how close this is to these homes right over here, and how close it is to the school.
Senator Franken's news conference was after a forum held here at the Firefighters Hall and Museum at 664 22nd Avenue Northeast in Minneapolis. And by the way, yes, you can rent the museum for birthday parties. The forum was open to both the media and members of the public. First responders, mayors, state legislators, and rail safety activists were all on a panel, half from Minnesota and half from Wisconsin. Senators Franken and Baldwin made brief statements, but spent most of the time listening.
A lot redacted.
But meanwhile, back at the ranch, a crucial deadline is coming up. The next Minneapolis municipal consent hearing is September 15th. After Senator Franken's rail safety news conference, I uncovered what I think is some really shocking news. We need to publicize this news as soon and as widely as possible before that hearing. Let's get some basic facts on the table. Mile-long chemical tanker trains already run through the Kenilworth corridor, carrying highly explosive Bakken crude oil and ethanol. I used my cell phone to record part of this one going through Kenilworth on August 30th, a Saturday morning. This illustration from the Metro Council's current plan shows light rail trains would be in 2 parallel tunnels about half a mile long from the Lake Street Bridge, then surfacing just before the channel between Cedar and Isles. Mile-long chemical tanker trains, like the one we just looked at, will be rolling above the tunnels. I had heard earlier that there would be a press conference after the forum. It's not the press room.
Are you going to the press conference? Yeah. Right out here.
Okay. My reason for coming to the event was to ask Senator Franken a question.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
Earlier, we heard the last question of that press conference. Here comes the first one.
Thank you. So we'll open it to questions.
Question on Southwest Light Rail, sir. The current plan is to have mile-long chemical trains going over a tunnel in the Kenilworth corridor that is a half a mile long with 2 light rail trains in it. Is that safe?
I actually have not I can't speak to that. I don't have knowledge of that, but it sounds like it's very in line with what we're talking about, is that we, anytime hazardous material is being transported, that there be notification of first responders, and that it be done as safely as possible, and that we know that the infrastructure along the way is sound.
I realize that part of the party.
Let's listen now to what Minneapolis Fire Chief John Friedel had to say about this plan after Senator Franken's news conference. We got time for a quick question?
What's that?
I'm doing a documentary on the Southwest Light Rail Plan in the Twin Cities, and the current plan is to have mile-long chemical trains that are going above, a little bit offset, but they're going above a half-a-mile tunnel, and there can be up to 2 light rail trains in that tunnel. Do you think that's safe?
Not, well, without looking at the way you described it, it certainly is questionable, you know, how that would look. Certainly want to see the plan on that, what that would look like going forward. And I'd like to be a part of that plan, to be able to look at that. And I think, you know, so far, I've only had one meeting with talking about tunnels and the length of tunnels. I'm always concerned about that, as I am concerned about what goes over above them. You know, so it's always a concern. Then I just hope that my hope that the first responders are certainly actively involved in that planning process and what that looks like, and to meet our response needs.
By the way, Chief Friedel was wearing black tape on his badge in honor of a St. Paul firefighter who died of a heart attack while on duty earlier in the week. So here's his verbal identification, followed by comments as he was walking away.
I'm the Chief Minneapolis Fire Department, Chief John Friedel.
Okay, real good. Thank you.
Okay. So that's going to be on YouTube.
It is. That's a fact. At this point, we need to take a deep breath and absorb what the chief was saying, which is frankly shocking news that must be reported by the mainstream media. Let's keep in mind that the chief's statement was made over a year after the Minneapolis City Council approved municipal consent for essentially the same plan in Kenilworth, including the tunnels and the mile-long chemical trains. The hard news from this clip is that even a year after that first vote, our first responder in chief for Minneapolis has been to a total of 1 meeting about that tunnel plan. Chief Friedel is very explicit about wanting to be more involved in the planning process.
You know, so it's always a concern. Then I just hope that my hope that the first responders are certainly actively involved in that planning process and what that looks like, and to meet our response needs.
I am frankly stunned by this. How could the process have gone as far as it has, with first responders being so incredibly marginalized? And to offer an invitation to the citizens of Minneapolis, so sue us. Why has the mainstream media not reported on such an incredible breakdown in the process? Again, we see that the mainstream media, what it reports on and what it doesn't report on, is a central part of this story. As polite, reserved Midwesterners, we can only imagine what some others, Jon Stewart comes to mind, might say about this kind of a situation. Okay, you get the point. But even though the situation really is outrageous, let's not go the tantrum route. Let's be disciplined, use our reasoning and fact-gathering abilities, and think and plan our way out of this mess. Taking that approach, we quickly see that our immediate mission is to show Minneapolis leaders there is an insurmountable public safety danger baked into the current plan. Municipal consent must not be given until this danger is eliminated. But let's frame this the other way. If Minneapolis does give municipal consent, the City Council and the Mayor must believe the plan is safe. So, let's start by confronting our city leaders, challenging them to agree to make one or the other of 2 possible statements. We'll use Mayor Hodges as our example. Here's the first one. It is safe to have 2 light rail trains in half-mile-long tunnels with a mile-long train of chemical tanker cars carrying Bakken crude or ethanol above the tunnels. Signed, Betsy Hodges, Mayor. Any city leader who supports municipal consent must be ready to make that statement. By voting yes, a city council member is making that statement. Now let's look at the flip side. If municipal consent is denied, state law requires a statement of what is needed to fix the problem. In this case, the answer is simple. Get the route out of Kenilworth and have first responders verify the rest of the plan is safe. So, if Mayor Hodges or a city council member can't make the first statement, here's the alternative. It is not safe to have 2 light rail trains in half-mile-long tunnels with a mile-long train of chemical tanker cars carrying Bakken crude or ethanol above the tunnels. Kenilworth co-location is unacceptable. Minneapolis can consent only when 1. The route is moved out of the Kenilworth corridor, and 2. Our Minneapolis first responders agree to safety measures for rail tanker cars near Target Field and beyond Lake Street. Signed, Betsy Hodges, Mayor. Our next step is to demonstrate more clearly why this is dangerous. It's obvious that Minneapolis Fire Chief Friedel is concerned about this, to say the least, but his involvement will probably take some time. Here's where we go back to what I introduced as Exhibit A, the Minneapolis Federal Courthouse. Here's a crucial timeline with only 3 dates. As you can see, construction was already underway when the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing occurred, but there was enough time to modify the building and plaza design. We're looking now at before and after images of the Oklahoma City bombing. The target was the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. 168 people were killed, and more than 680 were injured in what remains the worst domestic terrorist attack in U.S. history. The attackers parked a rented Ryder truck like this one in front of the building. The truck held a 7,000-pound homemade bomb with fuses set to go off at 9 a.m. shortly after it was parked. The Minneapolis Federal Courthouse design was modified after the Oklahoma City bombing. As we can see, the plaza has not very subtly disguised features designed to prevent a vehicle with explosives from reaching and possibly penetrating the front of the building. Both parking and stopping are prohibited on the remaining sides of the building. At street level, the sides are 20-foot tall blast-resistant concrete. When the Minneapolis Federal Courthouse opened, Oklahoma City was on everyone's mind. The cost to improve security of federal buildings after the attack was over $600 million. Crude oil and ethanol can explode under some conditions, but they also burn under any conditions, and of course all liquids flow downhill. This is why a tunnel next to a chemical train is so incredibly dangerous. Crude oil and ethanol weigh about 7.2 and 6.6 pounds per gallon. One tanker car holds about 30,000 gallons. This means one tanker car has about 30 times the ethanol weight of the Oklahoma City bomb, or more. Each tanker car is about 60 feet long. If a 1 mile long chemical train is centered over a half-mile long tunnel, there are about 20 cars beyond the tunnel opening on each end. Compared to the Oklahoma City bombing, there can be 600 times the weight or more on each side of the tunnel. Terrorists can attack with rocket-propelled grenades and now drones, to name just 2 ways. Derailing and rupturing only one tanker car at either or both ends of the tunnels could be catastrophic. The next issue is the safety of having chemical tanker trains and light rail cars traveling parallel to each other at grade. If we go down the Greenway, co-location would still be the plan from Lake Street to Shady Oak. If Minneapolis denies municipal consent, we will have more time to study this, and that's exactly what's needed. For now, let's just consider 2 dangers that go away. Because we have flat terrain, at-grade location eliminates first the danger of burning fluids flowing down into a tunnel, and second the danger of people being trapped in that tunnel. With these 2 dangers gone, we should do exactly what our Minneapolis fire chief is asking us to do. Get first responders involved in the planning process going forward. I'm willing to consider either a no-build option, there are excellent bus-based alternatives available, or an option with no tunnels, but at-grade location from Lake Street in Minneapolis to Shady Oak and Hopkins. Let's find out whether this can be done safely or not. We're moving toward wrap-up now for this chapter. In the next chapter, we'll be back to Exhibit A, the federal courthouse, to see how the Kenilworth co-location problems we've looked at and the deeply flawed scoping and route selection process have become legal issues in the Lakes and Parks Alliance lawsuit. But let's also bookmark more of what happened at Senator Franken's September 2nd forum and press conference. As we saw, I was ready to pounce and got a question off at the press conference. Susu had one ready too, but she was filtered out. Here's part of that filtering process, starting with her first attempt to ask a question.
First responder program.
Senator
This is about
Franken, you
oil
were
for
concerned
export.
about the fact that
She wasn't called on, but after the question was answered, the filtering process started to kick in.
Any other questions from members of the press?
Notice the qualifier, members of the press. Susu has had articles published by Twin City Daily Planet and other outlets. I'm published off and on, mostly Star Trib commentary articles.
I'm the guy that lobbied for the legislature to take the $30 million back on the Southwest Light Rail, and I'm pushing for an alternative plan to go through Uptown. Can we follow up on it?
Sure.
Okay.
Are you working
Thank
to
you.
change the federal laws?
Here, the senator's got to get going, but let me give you my card for the office.
I can see it right now.
We're trying not to, I'm against exploiting cruise.
Well, I'm against
So I got
putting oil through our land.
Okay, let me get you
Oil
a
for
card for
export.
our office to make sure
Why
you can
don't
get it through to
why don't I
him.
just tell you?
But frankly, we're both viewed as suspect, not members of the Solid as a Rock Rockman media mash. Some of us fit in better than others. And of course, I'm challenging the whole media process. Edgar Linares of WCCO Radio picked up on what was going on.
Hey, I'm with CCO Radio.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, what did you want to ask the secretary?
I wanted to say that there are two levels that and today it was all about Band-Aids. Fixing, oh gosh, if there's an accident, we gotta all talk the same thing and get there. That's the immediate level. But the federal level is we have laws from the 1800s that allow trains to go anywhere they want without citizens. Who cares where they live or what we need? And then we're exporting all this oil right up here. This is oil for export. This is not from Minnesota. And it runs through the Mississippi watershed, the Hudson watershed, and also the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Divide. This is all the water for North America.
What do you think seeing a train like this? I mean, it's just right here.
I live in the crash. I live in the blast zone, so I would hope that if there was an explosion, I would die right away with some kind of breathing problem, rather than live and not be able to breathe for the rest of my few days. That's my fear.
That's crazy to say something.
Well,
yeah. Just thinking that how dangerous it is to your home. How many feet would you say the train is from your bedroom?
I don't know, but when the train goes by, my bed shakes
I didn't realize they
close enough that it vibrates.
Are you glad to see that it's even a topic right now that it's being discussed?
We need to have changes at the federal level. I mean, this common carrier about carrying Canadian explosive stuff across our watersheds, this is ridiculous. It's not for us. I mean, they don't pay our taxes. They don't elect our representatives. Why is this happening? Why can't the government protect us?
What is your name, ma'am?
Susu Jeffrey.
Spell it just for the radio.
S-U-S-U Jeffrey.
And where do you live? What neighborhood?
I live in Bryn Mawr.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We'll follow up on what happened to that content, how Senator Franken's press conference appears to have been produced or stage managed, and more Rockman, much more Rockman, generally having to do with the rock roll expectations baked in to all organizations in our society, and with how those darn pesky individuals, outsiders, troublemakers, are filtered, processed, and here comes the railroad metaphor, sidetracked in and by our whole society's rockman process. Meanwhile, that's it for chapter 2 of This Is ... For more information about this video series, and at least 2 different ways to contribute, please visit my website, www.bobagain.com.